Hey guys, Dale here from Inspired Reviews, and today I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on Dark Souls 3, the latest game in the critically acclaimed Dark Souls series. Dark Souls 3 shares a lot with its predecessors, the challenging trial and error difficulty in everything being tied to one currency which is lost upon death. The game isn't identical to its predecessors though, there are plenty of new things and changes. I may as well start with the changes as they are all something I'm happy about. Hollowing is gone, so no more health penalty in ugly appearance for your character after dying. The game uses a new system called Ember, which acts as the opposite. So after defeating a boss, successfully invading another player, or helping through co-op will grant the Ember status. The perks of being Embered are an increased health bar and the ability to be invaded or invite other players to help with bosses. There is also a cool visual effect which wipes the floor with the old zombie effect. Another change, well a huge change I may add, is the removal of all the rubbish from Dark Souls 2. In fact, there is a huge list of all the problems with that game, so I'll name a few which I feel are the most significant. Enemies now have infinite respawns, as for some odd reason Dark Souls 2 had a feature that if you kill enemies in a zone a set amount of times, they are gone forever. The feature may seem like a balancing decision to begin with, but the problem with it is late in the game, it was next to impossible to get a high amount of souls, or get valuable crafting items the enemies dropped. So my point is Dark Souls 3 does away with this to allow farming of souls and resources. Another change from Dark Souls 2 is weapons don't break after killing 2 enemies. I may as well not go much further with that because I don't have a clue why they broke so quick in Dark Souls 2. The final change from 2 is multiplayer actually works as intended this time, something I'll get onto in a bit. Gameplay wise with these changes, Dark Souls 3 is very similar to the first, which is a very good thing. So for veterans they will feel right at home and newcomers can use it as an entry point. The downside is people who aren't fans of the early games due to difficulty or just not being into the gameplay won't have a change of opinion. One immediate thing I noticed when playing Dark Souls 3 is the backdrops are absolutely stunning, as they are 3D. The reason for this is because while initially it doesn't seem so, a lot of the areas in the background are visitable. This falls into another thing Dark Souls 3 is great at. While not truly open world, all of its areas are connected, so it reiterates the point about the backdrops. As they are more than just a simple background, they act as a landmark to signify where the plot will take you next. So say a huge castle in the distance, there's a chance it will end up as an area later in the game. While it's more refined with Dark Souls 3, this has been a staple with FromSoftware's games, and this game just solidifies the fact that FromSoftware are simply amazing at building worlds. Dark Souls 3's plot ties heavily into the lore of the first game, with a lot of the game's locations being areas from the first. There's also a lot of references to characters and events from the first, stuff I'm not going to spoil. Multiplayer in Dark Souls 3 is quite different from the past games, with a slight hint of Dark Souls 1 and Bloodborne fused together. Co-op with random people is still tied to a soul level system, meaning people can only play together if their levels are in a similar range, so no level 10s summoning a level 100 to breeze through the game. Like Bloodborne though, there is a way for friends to play together regardless of level. This is achieved through the simple system of adding identical passwords in the game's settings, so only summon signs of the people using the password appear, and again this bypasses the level restriction. I didn't play much PvP in Dark Souls 2, as if I'm honest it was awful. I did however play a lot of it in the first game, on PC, and it was a blast. Dark Souls 3 continues that. There are a few issues with it, but to me they seem to be pretty standard online issues. I may as well compare it to the first for ease. In Dark Souls 1 there were 2 types of PvP, invasions and duels. Invasions were the standard random matchup where the host had no say in the matter, so it was a hectic battle to the death, where at times a soul invader could be against a host and his potential co-op partners. Now it may seem unfair if it ends up as a 3v1 fight, but that's the point, the host didn't ask to be invaded. So surely an invader knows what he's getting into. This remains unchanged in Dark Souls 3. Duels on the other hand were a different matter. Basically, the invader places a summon sign to be potentially accepted into another world. So what happened was the community formed a method of sportsmanship and balance. Essentially it was more organised and fun, people didn't gang up on one person and people didn't spam health potions. The problem with Dark Souls 3 here is while there are people who play more sportsmanlike, there is an overabundance of people who literally play dirty. To be honest though, this is more of a personal issue which doesn't affect my opinion of the game itself. I just thought it's worth sharing in case anyone was going to buy the game just for duels. In fact, as time goes on there may not be as many bad sports. In terms of longevity, Dark Souls 3 retains the New Game Plus mechanic from its predecessors, which goes all the way up to something like New Game Plus 5000 to some absurdly high number that I actually don't know, as the highest I got to was New Game Plus in Dark Souls 1. with each new game cycle increasing in difficulty. All jokes aside, the difficulty spike does cap at new game +7. So the game is really long if you're a completionist. For people who only want to play once, my playthrough counting all optional bosses bar one took just over 60 hours. Of course, depending on skill, this time could be much quicker or longer. Like every Souls game, Dark Souls 3 has an exceptional soundtrack. While exploring, there isn't any ambient music, but every boss has their own theme which changes as the fight goes on. This gives each boss a sense of identity and tone. And speaking of bosses, Dark Souls 3 wipes the floor with the ones from the second game. I enjoyed every boss I fought throughout the game. They all had an epic large-scale feel to them. Like the previous games, the story isn't a traditional narrative with cutscenes at the start and end of every area. The story is again told within the world, attached to the descriptions of items collected and told by various NPCs you encounter. Since I played on the PS4, it's worth noting how the game performs. The game runs at locked 30 FPS and stood there for pretty much all of my playthrough. There were very rare drops as low as 20 FPS. Being a difficult game, you'd wonder if the FPS drops could get you killed. I can confirm I never died once due to a frame drop. In short, Dark Souls 3 is a brilliant game and for me is everything I wanted in a Souls game. An amazing dark fantasy world with the gameplay I loved from the first game, but refined to stay fresh. And it could be due to rustiness, but I found it more challenging than the first, which is great. This is all complemented with an amazing soundtrack to accompany the epic boss battles encountered in the game. I enjoyed this game that much I already can't wait to start New Game Plus. I definitely recommend giving this game a go whether you're a series vet or a complete newcomer. Since this is a Dark Souls video, it wouldn't be right not to end it with a little death montage. If you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe for more inspired game reviews.